Okay, perfect. So number 6 on what study guide is this?
It is study guide, um, exam 5 practice version 2.
Okay, exam 5, practice 2. Okay, perfect. So $140,000, 4-year, 9% bonds when the market rate was 8%. Bonds were issued at 144,713 semi-interest payments June 30th, December 31st. Prepare the amortization table. Okay, so the logic on this problem is this amount here, this 144,713, that's the actual amount of cash we received. And the reason is, like, when we wrote the bonds, okay, we wrote them as $140,000 bonds, and we agreed to pay 9% interest annually, which would be 4.5% interest semi-annually. Okay, so that's like what we agreed to pay. But then when we sold the bonds, like on the market, when people bought those bonds, they were actually willing to accept 8% interest, so a lower interest rate. So basically, what probably would have happened is interest rates went down, or the riskiness of our company went down. So they were willing to accept a lower interest rate than what we agreed to pay. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so instead of like changing the bonds and saying, okay, fine, we'll pay 8%, instead, what happens is the people, the investors, are willing to pay a premium. So they just pay extra up front, and then they end up receiving that 9% annual interest rate. So 4.5% semi annual interest rate. Does that make sense? So they pay extra for the bonds up front, but then over the life of the bonds, they receive that higher interest payment. Okay. So that's kind of the logic of what's going on. And that helps us understand like why we even need this amortization table. Okay. So our carrying amount is based on this. And in one of the videos, I show you how to calculate that, right? Using the present value function, or actually using the tables too. I show you how to do that. So make sure you know how to do that also. But let's just focus on this one for now. Okay. So what will happen is every 6 months, we're going to pay 4.5% interest, which is just 9% divided by 2, right? So we're just going to go 0.09 divided by 2, and then multiply that by the face value, 140,000. Okay. So every 6 months, it's going to be the exact same payment. This is what we've agreed to pay. Okay. That's how bonds work here in the United States, is we pay interest every 6 months. And it's interesting, we don't pay any principal typically on these types of corporate bonds. Okay. So we're just paying $6,300, $6,300, $6,300. Okay. Which is just the stated rate, the 9%, divided by 2 to get it to be semi-annual, and then multiplied by the face value. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For the interest expense, it's actually based off of the market rate. Okay, so that's 0.08 divided by 2. Okay, so that's the market rate is 8%. And then multiply that by the carrying amount. Oops. So you're going to see that it fluctuates every 6 months. It changes a little bit. Okay. And then this premium amortization is simply the difference between the two. So just 6,300, oops, minus 5,852. Okay. And so then our carrying amount, what will happen with it, sorry, is see how it's bigger than the face value. So it's 144 and the face value is 140. So the carrying amount always goes in the direction of the face. So in this case, it's going to go down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to go 144, 713 minus the 511.48. So it's going to slowly start to go down until it reaches the face value, which is 140,000. Okay, so that's our first 6 months. Like we're done with that. Now we can go on to our next 6 months, which is the end of the year. So again, we're going to go 0.08 divided by 2 and multiply that by the new carrying amount. Okay, that carrying amount right there. And then again, the premium amortization is just the difference between the two. And then the carrying amount is going to go down. Okay. It's actually easier when you reference, you have this kind of put in where you can reference cell and just copy it down, but we're doing it kind of, let's see. I don't know why it turned red on me, but we just need to copy this down. Copy this down. There's our table. Yeah, I don't know why.
It turned to. Oh, there it goes.
Okay. All right. So, and obviously these bonds, what does it say? The life of the bonds? Oh, it's just the first 4 interest payments. So it doesn't tell us. We could drag this down and ultimately find what the maturity date is, because basically we would get back to 140,000. Just do it for fun. Right there is the maturity date. Okay. That's like the full amortization table is to 140. Okay. But it doesn't really require us to do that. Okay. So that's one step that you'll do on the test. And honestly, the example on the test is very similar to this. It may be a discount instead of a premium. I don't know. But the only difference on a discount is here we would start less than 140,000. So it'd be like 135,000 or 130,000 and then go up. Whereas because this was issued at a premium, it's going to go down. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. So then the next step we had to do is we had to do journal entries. Okay. So the very first journal entry is when we issue the bonds. So remember what happens with any kind of debt is we're receiving some type of asset, and in return, we're recording a liability, which just means we have a future obligation. Okay. So we are receiving cash and we're recording the carrying amount, the amortized amount. That's how much we're receiving. Okay. And then we're going to record bonds payable. And that's actually only for the face amount, right? At the end of the life of these bonds, we actually only had to pay $140,000 because that's what we issued is $140,000 a bond. Okay, so we actually received more money, right? And then the difference is going to be premium amortization or premium amortized. Better to say. So, where's my paste? Instead of premium amortized, it should be. Oh, there we go. I could have just typed it by now, huh? But anyways, amortization. Okay. And all that is the difference between the two. So you could just do the difference. That's fine. Or you can go over. Oh, actually, on this table, it doesn't have it. But anyway, so it's just the difference between the two. So that's the initial journal entry. We received $144,713. We have a payable of $140,000, and the difference is the premium amortization. Okay. Now, with our prepare the journal entry for the bond issuance and the first interest payment. Okay. So when we pay the interest, now we're going to be paying out cash, right? So that's a credit. We need an expense. So interest expense, which expenses are debit balances, right? And the
Mhm.
difference between these two is going to be that premium amortization. We know here it was a credit. So down here, it's going to have to be a debit. Okay. And so our interest expense is based off of this number here in the interest expense column. Okay. The actual cash we pay is based off of this column, cash paid. And the difference between the two is the premium amortized. And we'll just double check to make sure those balance, which they should. So 6,300. Okay. So yeah, that's how you do those problems. Just like, let me silence my phone real quick. It's ringing.
So I have to say, I recognize that that ringtone.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's how you do those. Does it make sense? Like the idea behind it, does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of a goofy thing. Like the reason it exists this way is because initially bonds were all done on paper, right?
Mhm.
So this $140,000 part and the 9% interest, like that was written out on a piece of paper and you couldn't really go in and change it. And so, like, if the market rate was different, instead of changing the interest rate, they would just change how much they actually paid for the bonds. And so we just continue to do that to this day. Okay. So even though we issued $140,000 bonds, we received extra money because the interest rate, the market interest rate, was lower than the stated rate. So it's kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Your questions on it? On this
No,
specifically?
I think I'm good on this one.
Okay, sweet. What I'm going to do is I'll stop recording this.